At 34, Marconi returned home to a sight no man should ever face. 14 crying babies, born from one single night. But this wasn't madness. It was the price of obedience, and the consequence of a life where one man was never allowed to choose. Before the children, before the wives, before the tragedy, there was a young man who was forbidden to marry, and a decision that stole 14 years of his life. Marconi was the only child of his parents, born into a quiet mountain family where tradition ruled every decision. From the moment he opened his eyes to the world, he was loved deeply. His mother saw him as her miracle, and his father raised him with pride, believing he would one day become the pillar of their bloodline. But above them all stood Marconi's grandfather, a stern, unyielding man whose word was law. He believed life was not meant to be rushed, and that patience was the greatest wisdom a man could ever learn. When Marconi turned 20, his parents believed it was time. "It's enough," his mother said softly. "He's grown. He needs a wife, a home, a future." But the grandfather struck the ground with his cane and said, 20 is too young. A man who has not suffered has no right to lead a family." Marconi listened in silence, anger burning inside his chest. He wanted marriage, warmth, children, everything other young men dreamed of. Yet in that house, the grandfather's voice stood above all others. Even Marconi's father, though torn, could not defy his own father. So Marconi was sent to the mountains. Every day, he herded sheep across vast, empty lands. The wind became his only companion, and the animals his only witnesses. In the distance, far beyond the hills, there was a village where every month young men and women gathered. They laughed, danced, sang, and lived freely. Marconi knew of these gatherings, but he never went. His grandfather and father had forbidden it. "Distraction weakens the soul," his grandfather said. So Marconi obeyed. Years passed. By the time Marconi reached 25, loneliness had carved deep lines into his heart. He returned home one evening and spoke with a voice filled with desperation. "Either you marry me," he said to his parents, "or I will leave." His mother cried. His father lowered his head, and his grandfather answered without hesitation, "You will not marry before 30. The words struck Marconi like lightning. "5 more years," he shouted. "That's impossible." The old man looked at him calmly. "5 more years will teach you patience, and patience will save your life." Broken, defeated, and trapped by duty, Marconi returned to the mountains. At 30, the long-awaited moment finally arrived. His family searched for a bride. Then another. Then another. Each time, the answer was the same. No. The truth was cruel. Marconi's face was considered ugly. In a world that valued appearance over character, no woman wanted him. Whispers followed his name. Doors closed quietly. Hope died slowly. One night, Marconi collapsed to the ground and wept like a child. "No woman will ever want me," he said to the darkness. "Why was I born this way? Why is my fate worse than others?" He returned to the mountains, carrying a heart heavier than any burden he had ever known. Years passed again. At 34, fate took a strange turn. Marconi and his father traveled far, farther than he had ever gone before, to a distant place where women were sold like property. A place without mercy, a place without love. There, his father bought 14 women. Marconi made a decision that shocked everyone. "Don't forget to support us with a like and subscribe." "I should have married at 20, he said. "From 20 to 34 are 14 years. I lost 14 years of my life, so I will marry 14 women." They returned home. The grandfather prepared a house for him, silent and expressionless. That night, Marconi entered the house. It was the last night he would ever live as a free man. By fate or tragedy, all 14 women conceived from him that same night. At dawn, before the sun fully rose, a messenger arrived. Marconi's mother was dying. She was gravely ill, and her condition worsened by the hour. Marconi turned to his father. "Go to her," he pleaded. "Stay with her." But his father refused. "She needs you more than she needs me." Without hesitation, Marconi mounted his horse. His heart was torn in two, between a life he never wanted and a mother he could not abandon. He rode until exhaustion, until pain no longer mattered. When he reached his mother, he stayed. One day became 1 month. 1 month became a year. He watched over her, cared for her, prayed beside her bed, and never once thought of himself. When she finally recovered, Marconi returned home, and waiting for him were 14 children, 14 lives, born from one night, created by years of loss, obedience, and regret. Marconi stood at the doorway, silent. His life had become the very lesson his grandfather tried to teach him. That time never returns. That obedience has a price. And that patience, when forced, can break a man as easily as it can shape him. When Marconi returned home, the house was no longer silent. 14 children filled the air with cries, laughter, and chaos. For a long moment, he stood still, overwhelmed, not with regret, but with responsibility. These lives were now tied to his name, his breath, his future. Instead of turning away, Marconi made a decision that would redefine him. He sold part of his livestock and began building a new house, larger, stronger, and meant to last. Stone by stone, he worked with his own hands. The villagers watched in disbelief as the man once mocked for his appearance became a pillar of endurance. By day, he herded sheep across the mountains as he always had. By night, he returned to a home full of children who knew his voice before they knew his face. He learned patience not from his grandfather, but from fatherhood. The women, once strangers bound by fate, slowly became a family. Marconi treated them with fairness, dividing his time, his food, and his care without cruelty. For the first time in his life, he was no longer waiting. He was living. 1 year passed. Then the impossible happened again. All 14 women were with child once more. This time, fear did not strike his heart. Marconi smiled for the first time in years. He expanded the house, built shelters for animals, and taught his first children how to walk the fields beside him. Soon, 14 more children were born. 28 lives now ran through the land like wildflowers after rain. And then, another miracle. His mother returned. Healthy, smiling, stronger than before. When she saw the children, tears filled her eyes. "You waited," she whispered to Marconi, "and God gave you more than you ever asked for." The grandfather, now old and silent, watched from a distance. He never apologized, but his eyes carried something new: acceptance. Marconi never became a handsome man, but he became something far greater: a father, a provider, a man who turned loss into legacy. And in the mountains where he once felt alone, his name would be remembered, not for his face, but for the family that filled the valley with life. Don't forget to subscribe, click like, and write in the comments from which country you are watching.